Management Development Seminar Workshop on Institutional Leadership and Accountability in Education, January 8th to 22nd, 1986, in Gwaine Teachers College, Mlangano, Swaziland. Anyone interested is welcome to use it wherever appropriate. The role of supervision of instruction concerned with accountability in education. By Lulsegged, Alamea Lulsegged. Bachelor of Science Education, Colorado. Master of Science Education and Ed.D. USC Los Angeles. Chief Technical Advisor, Educational Research and Planning. UNESCO/SIDA Project 503/SWA/13. Ministry of Education. Mbabane, Swaziland. January 1986. Accountability in Education. Introduction. The faith of the peoples of developing countries in education is as strong as their faith in their religions. This may be seen even in the farming communities of the remote villages and nomadic societies who saw very little, if any, value in formal education in the past. National governments, too, are ever more aware that development of their human resources accelerates developments in all sectors. Johns and Morfitt, 1960, wrote that modern civilization demands knowledge, understanding, and technological skills. Development of these through education provides the opportunity for progress. Neglect invites through education provides the opportunity for progress. Neglect invites misery, exploitation, and eventual disaster. Education means more than simple academic literacy. It means the development of that complex of knowledge and skill by which men may improve their lot and sustain their nation. And it means they're developing the wisdom to do so. Johns, Morfitt, and Reller, 1974, have written, "A major purpose of all schools and other educational institutions should be to contribute to the development of a dynamic, self-renewing society by assuming a major role in preparing the citizen, and especially the children and youth, to participate in and contribute effectively and constructively to the orderly development of that society." Yet, this is not the whole story. The development we seek must transform our society. Our youth must be equipped for this task. Often, we people in the developing world forget that different conception of life. We seek to meet the educational needs of our societies by coping those of the developed lands. This can be valuable. It can also be counterproductive. Our students do not share the same background or face quite the same tasks as those in developed lands. We must borrow those technologies which are international in nature and effective for us. Others we must modify or reject, developing the ones better suited to our conditions. What I have said is a platitude, unless we can judge correctly what works well here from what is not. Here, our academies can help us, but teachers, educational administrators, and supervisors must do the work. Through administrators and supervisors, teachers can learn new options in teaching. By monitoring their teachers, administrators, and supervisors can evaluation the various teaching techniques that their guidance may be effective. The process by which educational administrations and supervisors monitor and assess the quality of education in their schools is called education in their schools, is called educational accountability. This paper is designed to clarify that concept, identify some of its techniques, and shew its importance to the improvement of education in Swaziland. In this paper, I shall first explain what accountability is, then describe its three basic types: A, goal, B, input, and C, product accountability. This last is the central concern of MOO paper, for it alone is concerned with the improvement of teaching to promote a dynamic and self-renewing educational system. This is what your central concern is as teacher supervisors. The concept of accountability. Ellie Wickline related the exchange that the late Senator Robert F. Kennedy had with the Federal Commissioner of Education, Harold Howe, in 1966. "What have you accomplished with the $1 billion that you got for elementary and secondary education last year?" In reply, Commissioner Howe began listing the number of books that had been expended for teachers, the amount of money that had been used for the purchase of equipment and materials, and so on. When he finished, Senator Kennedy was quite impatient and asked, "What happened to the children? Do you mean that you spent $1 billion and you don't know whether they can read or not. The implication is very clear. A demand for a new dimension of the evaluation of the outcome of educational input was in the making in the past. Parents who took for granted the schools were doing the best they could are now demanding that school authorities account for the failures of their children. Gallup poll of 1970 reported that 67% of the American adults favored teachers and administrators to be held accountable for the progress of the students. Gronlund, 1974. Computation of per-student cost of education has improved tremendously. Every year, this cost is constantly escalating. The question now is whether the educators can show the educational benefits derived from these costs. Auditors go to school to investigate how money is expended rather than the resultant educational goal achieved by the expenditures. They do not ask questions such as, have the students been able to move from where they were where they should be? Education, too, are not accustomed to quantify achievement of objectives in terms of expenditure. They're simply satisfied with number or letter grades or even simple pass/fail matters at the ends of the semester or the year. By and large, these terminal grades based on limited tests could not satisfactorily show the ability of the student, whether or not he has acquired basic knowledge or skills and abilities requires to produce ideas, plans, and products which are uniquely his. Thus, a movement called accountability in education began as a means in ascertaining to what extent the goals and objectives of a specified educational endeavor has been achieved. Definition of the term accountability. The dictionaries define accountability as implying responsibility. The concept implies that any person who is given a job to do should be responsible or accountable for an effective and efficient fulfillment of that job. Consequently, the term or concept of accountability in education has by and large taken to include the following functions. 1. The setting of goals or objectives. 2. Determination of the validity and relevance of these goals and objectives. 3. Assessment of how fully those goals and objectives have been achieved. 4. Examination of which conditions help facilitate and which retard such achievement. 5. Modification of methods and/or objectives to improve performance. Who is accountable to whom for what? Education is a tremendous enterprise that affects or is affected by almost every individual in a nation in some way. Over the past decade, Swaziland has spent more money for education than for any other sector. As in other lands, Swaziland's government seek to control the schooling processes they finance by drawing up their curricula and by specifying their general goals and objectives. And increasingly, parents are demanding education that meets their children's needs. They, too, want to control educational means and objectives. The straightforward implication of the accountability movement is that people engaged in the educational enterprise should demonstrate that the resource, human and material, available for education are being properly interpreted into effective processes towards the achievement of goals and objectives. In the program of accounting for the progress of the education enterprise, each person has to be responsible to and for someone else, and for specified activities. Who then is responsible to whom and what? Let us, for the purpose of clarification, take Swaziland's educational system to organize accountability lines. Accountable to, accountable for, the Queen Regent, the Parliament, the Minister of Education, selection, definition, and priority setting of appropriate goals and objectives, goal accountability. 1. Regional Education Office. 2. Officials at the Ministry of Education. Selection, employment, and effective and efficient use of instructional program inputs for the realization of the goals or objectives. Input accountability. Schools administrators, teachers, exported outcome of teaching as an educational program operators. Output of products accountability. Figure 1. Line of accountability for educational programs of Swaziland. The accountability line, as given above, looks clear-cut. However, a closer examination reveals greater complexity. Minister of Education has the overall responsibility for the education of the country. He is accountable to the Parliament through the Prime Minister, who appoints him, who gets his budget approved. Based on the national policy of education, The minister has the responsibility of establishing the appropriate goals and objectives for the schools to follow. Although these tasks are accomplished through the various divisions of the Ministry of Education headed by the Principal Secretary, he is eventually accountable for defining and setting goals. The regional education officers are executive bodies. Their major accountability to the minister is in the quality of teacher input, the educational programming, since the responsibility for teacher selection, employment, and deployment rests with them. The ministerial divisions are multitudinous indeed. For example, the development and improvement of schools' curriculum, sequential instructional program development, is the responsibility of the Chief Inspector for Teacher Education and Curriculum Development, while the Chief Inspector of Secondary Education is accountable for the secondary, commercial, and technical education. The Chief Inspector for Primary and Pre-Primary Education is responsible for the basic first-level education. As used in our diagram, school administrators include school-level principals and their aides, all Ministry of Education officials from the Principal Secretary on down. Program inputs, curriculum, finance, teachers, and other instructional resource, including the socio-physical conditions of the school, are primarily the responsibility of Regional Education Office and the ministry officials. By school-level administration, I mean the principals and their aides. Teachers are the program operators. They teach the students. They achieve or fail to achieve all our and their educational objectives. For the regional education offices and to Ministry of Education, educational objective to be anything more than source of inspiration or platitudes, teachers must be held to account, either by their principals or by other school administration. How may teachers be held accountable and for what? Let us see. Modern evaluation versus traditional appraisal for teaching effectiveness. Traditionally, educational evaluation was concerned with the evaluation of teacher performance. Teachers were scrutinized and evaluated. Inspectors assessed teacher performance and teachers' personality traits, intelligence, and other personal attributes. These assessments were subjective and often very difficult to defend. Lucio and McNeil, 1969, observed, "In the past, the appraisal of the teacher performance has been dealt with in amorphous and diverse ways. Someone, in some fashion, remote or proximate to teaching, has been responsible for the evaluation of teacher performance. As a result, evaluation has been based upon every conceivable criterion, technique, and individual style imaginable. Because many evaluation procedures have had very little relation to teachers' essential tasks. The reason for the recurring criticisms by teachers and others are understandable. Product accountability shifts the focus of evaluation in teaching effectiveness to the appraisal of the product or the process of teaching. The goal, the degree to which this learning has taken place are at issue, not the teacher's personality." Marks, Stoops, and King, Stoops, 1978, have summarized the differences between modern appraisal, assessment, and evaluation and those of the traditional type. 1. Modern supervision directs attention towards the fundamentals of education and orients appraisal and improvement programs within the general aim of education. 2. The aim of supervision is the appraisal, analysis, and improvement of the total teaching learning rather than the narrow and limited aim of improving the teachers in service. 3. The focus of appraisal is on a situation, not on a person or group of persons. All persons are co-workers aiming at the improvement of a situation. No group is superior to another, operating to improve the inferior group. 4. The teacher is removed from the embarrassing position as the focus of attention and the weak link in the educational process. The teacher assumes the rightful position as a cooperative member of a total supervisory team concerned with the improvement of learning. The aim of teaching is to affect learning. Effectiveness and efficiency of learning is judged by the student's behavioral change. The objectives of evaluation, then, are to find out whether or not teaching has resulted in the desired behavioral changes, and if it has not, to find out why. Identifying the causes of such failure, be it total or partial, would help teachers to modify their objectives, reorganize the curricular experiences to be taught according to the modified objectives. C. Look for new and better methods, techniques, and tools of teaching that will ensure the fulfillment of the objective, and D. assess and appraise the outcome of teaching, test what has been learned. As Lucio and McNeil, 1969, stated, when attention is given to the degree to which the goals of teaching are reached, various value judgments about teaching acts or teacher competence can be reduced, if not eliminated. By changing its focus of attention from passing value judgment on teachers to assessing various educational processes, educational evaluation has developed greater precision. This is the chief advantage of the use of accountability in education. F.J. McDonald and D. Put it this way, the central feature of an accountability system must be the procedures for remedying deficiencies or improving performance. The analysis of achievement score or evaluation of professional competence is meaningless if it does not lead to changes in educational performance. Product accountability, what teachers are accountable for. Unless teachers are provided with the tools they need, the proper inputs, they can accomplish little, and hence can be accountable for little. To train a person to drive a car well, goal, cannot be accomplished if the trainer is not supplied with a car, fuel, and other necessary things. Input. The importance of the right kind of input cannot be emphasized more. But when well supplied, they should be able to teach effectively. Gauging their effectiveness of teaching by monitoring its effects, student learning, is called product accountability. To evaluate teaching effectiveness for product accountability, we must consider 1. Terminal behavior. What is it that teachers and supervisors want their students to know, to master, or to achieve during the term? After considering national, state, and / or local educational policies and the background and abilities of their students, the teacher and his supervisor should together determine what terminal behavior they plan to induce in their students. These then do or perform to demonstrate the desired behavioral change. 2. Prerequisite. Background knowledge. It is important to establish through pre-test, analysis of the student's records, etc., the student's entry knowledge, abilities, and attitude to determine their readiness to begin on the new instructional objectives and succeed in achieving them. 3. Instructional input. This is comprised of the organized and sequential learning experiences students receive to achieve the objectives. After the sequence of instructional activities is planned, methods of imparting arrived at, teachers and supervisors must determine what teaching aids and other instructional materials may facilitate learning. Throughout the teaching process, the teacher needs to keenly observe and record student progress to each stated behavioral goal. These records should describe student performances and should avoid using value-laden terms. 4. Evaluation of the output. Because students have been pre-tested and because objectives are formulated in precise behavioral terms, it should be possible to unambiguously measure how much student performances have improved and whether said objectives have been achieved. If they have not, teachers and supervisors need to find out the reasons why and to modify the above procedures. Objectives partially achieved or failed. Modify and improve. Steps to repeat teaching. Terminal behavior, specific and operational objective. Establishment of prerequisite through pretest. Administration of instructional input. Objectives partially achieved or failed. Evaluation of product. Objectives achieved. Continue with the next unit. Figure 2. Evaluation of teaching effectiveness. Supervisors need criteria of evaluation established jointly with teachers they supervise. Criteria should from teacher to teacher, from school to school, and from community to community. In teaching, no two teachers need have the same approaches, the same methods and techniques. Some may require elaborate and extensive illustration charts and diagrams. Others may prepare and select just enough visual aids to drive facts home. Moreover, individual teachers must adopt their approaches to the students they teach. They also differ from place to place and time to time. Much as the teacher needs to adopt his approaches to his students and their needs, so the supervisor needs to adopt his own to each teacher in each classroom situation. Supervisors need a wide repertoire of varied techniques to assist and improve the effectiveness of their teachers. Rigid, bureaucratically established guidelines for supervisor to follow often stagnate teachers' initiative, constrain their development, and sap their enthusiasm. Sergiovanni and Sterrett, 1979, aptly summarize Kunkel and Tucker's 1977 5 criteria of evaluation. They are worth examining. Quality 1. Holism. The evaluation should avoid distortion of the total reality being evaluated by an undue emphasis on quantification or on only a few variables. Towards this end, both statistical and existential forms of inference should be used. Quality 2. Helpfulness towards program improvement. This is really the key to formative evaluation and what distinguishes it from summative evaluation. The primary purpose of formative evaluation is to assist the one responsible for the curriculum's program. It looks to growth improvements, increased effectiveness, rather than to ranking, judging, categorizing, criticizing. Quality 3. Acceptance of hard and soft data. In order to reduce distortion through methodological rigidity or theoretical bias, the reality being evaluated should be described by both empirical and intuitive methodologies. The qualities of the phenomena, as well as the quantitative properties, deserve attention. Quality 4. Evaluation vulnerability. The process of evaluation requires dialogue between the evaluator and the evaluated, in which the theory and methodology of the evaluator are open to question. Rather than assuming an elitist posture, the evaluator must enter a shared enterprise with the evaluated, in which perceptions are discussed and conclusion negotiated. The evaluator should be as vulnerable as the evaluated. Quality 5. Vision of the future. Since the purpose of the evaluation is the improvement of the program or the behavior being evaluated, the evaluator ought to be able and willing to disclose his view of the future context in which such improved programs or behaviors will function better. In this way, evaluation is seen as dynamic, as creative, and as open to the future, as in fact that essential activity that keeps an action system in a process of self-renewal. Types of evaluation of product. There are several different kinds of evaluation to measure the outcome of educational programs. For the purpose of our discussion this morning, we will examine the similarities and differences between the 3 types of evaluation: diagnostic, formative, and summative evaluation as presented by Bloom, Hosting, and Meadows, 1971. This table clearly shows the uses of evaluation for placement, diagnosis, and for instructional decision-making. Figure 3. Similarities and difference between diagnostic, formative, and summative evaluation. Types of evaluation: diagnostic, formative, summative. Function placement: determining the presence or absence of prerequisite skills. Deterring the student's prior level of mastery. Feedback to student and teacher on student progress through a unit. Location of errors in terms of the structure of a unit, so that remedial alternative instruction techniques can be prescribed. Certification or grading of students at the end of a unit, semester, or course. Classifying the student according to various characteristics known or thought to be related to alternative modes of instruction. Determination of underlying cause of repeated learning difficulties. Time for placement at the during instruction outset of unit, semester, or year's work. At the end of a unit, semester, or year's work. During instruction, when student evidences repeated inability to profit fully from ordinary instruction. Type of formative and instrumentation. Summative instruments for pre-tests. Standardized achievement tests. Standardized diagnostic tests. Teacher-made instrument. Observation and checklists. Specially designed formative instruments. Final or summative examinations. How objective sample of evaluation prerequisite are sampled behavior. Specific of each entry sample of weighted course objectives. Sample of student variables hypothesized or know to be related to a particular type of instruction. Sample of physically, emotionally, or environmentally related behaviors. Specific sample of all related tasks in the hierarchy of a unit. A sample of weighted courses objectives. Item difficulty. Diagnosis of perquisite skill and abilities. A large number of easy items, 65% difficulty or higher. Cannot be specified beforehand. Average difficulty, ranging from 35% to 70%, with some very easy and some very difficult items. Scoring criterion. Norm and reference. Criterion reference. generally norm-referenced but can be criterion-referenced. Method of profile by reporting. Individual sub-skills. Individual pattern of pass-fail scores on each task in the hierarchy. Total score or sub-scores by objectives. Significance of accountability in teaching effectiveness. Accountability is not an end in itself, but a means to an end. By indicating how successfully given teaching strategies produce the desired outcome and by diagnosing the reason for failure when failure occurs. Product accountability techniques, combined with proper supervision, should help the teacher improve his teaching. Evaluation has many other purposes. It may be used for granting teacher tenure, permanency of employment, in their dismissal, for promotion withholding salary increment, or giving bonus merit pay. In this morning discussion, I have focused evaluation as a means to improve the classroom instruction because it is the most important for us. Our primary concern must be improving our teachers to teach more effectively, rather than selecting the most capable among them. Marks, Stoops, and King Stoops, 1978, according to A.S. Barr, 1947, have listed the instructional improvement task functions of a supervisor as follows. 1. Evaluation the data related to the educational products in terms of the accepted goal of education and the objectives of instruction. A. Determining cooperatively critical analysis of goals. B. Selecting the means of appraisal and applying them. C. Analyzing the data so as to discover strength and weaknesses in the product. 2. Conducting a critical analysis of the entire teaching learning situation so as to determine the antecedents of satisfactory, anticipated, and unsatisfactory student growth as reflected in observable behavioral changes and operationally defined capabilities. A. Studying the course of study, the curriculum in operation. B. Studying the materials of instruction, the equipment, and the socio-physical environment of learning and development. C. Studying the factors related to instruction, the teacher's personality, academic and professional training, organization for instruction, use of materials, methods and techniques of instruction, and other factors. 3. Improving the entire teaching learning situation. A. Improving the course of study and the curriculum in operation. B. Improving the materials of instruction, the equipment, and the socio-physical environment of learning and development. C. Improving those factors relating directly to instruction which may be dealt with by the supervisory team. D. Improving such factors as may be present in the learner which may affect his development and achievement which may be attacked in school situation. 4. Evaluating the objectives, methods, and outcome of supervision. A. Discovering and applying the technique of evaluation. B. Evaluating the results of given supervisory programs, including the factors which may tend to limit the success of those programs. C. Evaluating and improving the performance of all who compose the supervisor team. Factors influencing teaching effectiveness. The success of teaching, as in business endeavor or military organization, needs the right king of inputs. In an industry, a machinist should have a training to run a machine to be productive. Training alone would not be enough for productivity unless he is furnished with a machine and materials to be produced. The same machinist cannot be expected to produce 100 units of items an hour on a machine that has the capacity to produce only 40 units. In the same vein, an army, peasants untrained and unarmed, cannot be successful in a battlefield. Success has its priorities. In teaching, consequently, one has to consider the following factors to be important. 1. Training and qualification of teacher input. It is very important that a teacher has the necessary academic qualification and professional training to carry out effectively his teaching duties in the school or grade level he will be assigned to teach. As some hold it, any warm body with a little academy's knowledge could fill a teacher's position. But the question would be, can he carry out the most important function of a qualified teacher, that of teaching to affect learning? By all means, the answer would be no. Fortunately, in Swaziland, the academic and professional qualification has been gradually improving. The number of unqualified teachers in the secondary schools has dropped from 29, 1% of the total teachers in 1975 to 7% in 1984. Moreover, we might safely predict the possibility that the first professional university degree would become the minimum qualification for entry to the teaching profession. In future, judging from the accelerated growth and development of the higher institution and the current emphasis on teacher training. Nevertheless, those who are responsible for not only the training, but also the initial selection, employment, and deployment of teachers are accountable for the success of school programs and the kinds and qualities of teacher input they pump into the system. The teachers once selected, appointed, and assigned to teach will be accountable for the expert professional knowledge, abilities, and skills they release into their teaching. Moreover, they are accountable for the constant improvement of their professional know-hows. 2. Supervisory leadership. The principal or headmaster is the closest supervisory leader that teachers have for advice and assistance. The supervisory leader has as his primary function to facilitate teaching and learning through a development of operational goals and policies, B. Stimulation and development of programs of instruction, and C. Making available all the necessary instructional materials, equipment, and other important resources that teachers need to successfully carry out teaching. To properly accomplish his leadership functions, a principal keeps abreast with more recent research finding to upgrade his administrative and supervisory abilities and techniques. He, the leader, is the man among his colleagues, teachers who strives to delegate power, B. Build morale and develop his staff members through the use of sound techniques of supervision, C. Plan constructive and acceptable criticism, D. Plan change so that it is smoothly accepted, E. Work with individuals or group establishing himself as a colleagues or a member of the group. Aspect of a leader who facilitates teaching and learning. The reverse qualities in an authoritarian administrator hamper the success of the educational goals. Consequently, teachers need a professionally trained administrator in charge of their schools to lead, coordinate, and harmonize their efforts. 3. Environment of learning. It is hopeless to ask a teacher to be effective when a conducive socio-physical environment, necessary and basic instructional resource, technological or otherwise, are not provided. Gone are the good old days when teachers were able to fulfill their duties and responsibilities with as few teaching materials as possible to teach the 3 Rs. Today, teaching is a complex and sophisticated task. Explosion of knowledge and scientific break troughs are common everyday affairs. Teachers, therefore, need the experiences from the great bulk of knowledge available as they plan sequential educational programs to impart to their students. This new knowledge and scientific discoveries also require new methods and techniques based on from simple, basic teaching aids to sophisticated technology. It is therefore imperative that the teacher be provided with the necessary instructional facilities before he is held accountable for the achievement of the expected goals. 4. Student-related factors. Accountability in teaching effectiveness should not be divorced from taking into consideration student-related factors which may or may not facilitate the achievement of expected outcome. These include A. Students' home environment. Psychological and sociological research findings assert that children from educated homes learn much faster and grasp abstract ideas quicker than children from uneducated homes. Klausmeier, 1966. Classroom instruction is easier for urban school children than rural due to the kinds of everyday exposures the urban children have in the cities that facilitate learning. Irrespective of the background of the children, home conditions, community environment, socioeconomic status, the teacher is responsible and accountable to educate all. B. Student-teacher ratio. Teachers in developing countries find it often difficult to institute some of the more modern methods and techniques of teaching, such as flexible scheduling, individualized instruction, etc., due to the large number of students they will be assigned to teach. It is not uncommon to find a student-teacher ratio of anywhere between 50 to 1-70 to 1, usually in a classroom that is too small to create a conductive class atmosphere. To vary the methods and techniques in order to cater for individual differences and to conduct exploration and teacher is expected to account for the productive outcome of teaching learning situation. C. Willingness to learn. Attitudes and values the students bring to the classroom play an important part in willingness to learn. The teacher, however, is responsible to instill the desire to learn. Teachers can do this through the recognition of their own attitudes and values and those of their pupils so that they are fair, just, sympathetic, helpful to, and unbiased against a child whose attitudes and values are different from their own. This does not, however, mean the teacher encourages the antisocial conduct of the student, but he tries to teach the student the correct and acceptable behavior without antagonizing him. The factors given above, though not exhaustive, are some of the common elements which facilitate or retard teaching learning process. Failure of learning, therefore, may not be automatically failure of the teacher until all other factors that might have contributed to the retardation have been considered. Gronland, 1974, according to Dyer, 1973, gives the concept of teacher accountability in the following three principles. 1. The professional status of a school is to be held responsible for knowing as much as it can about the intellectual and personal social development of the pupils in its charge, and B. about the conditions and educational services that may be facilitating or impeding the pupil's development. 2. The professional staff of a school is to be held collectively responsible for using this knowledge as best it can to maximize development of its pupils towards certain defined and agreed up on pupil towards certain clearly defined and agreed upon pupil performance objectives. 3. The Board of Education, the Ministry of Education, and the Regional Education Office in the case of Swaziland, has a corresponding responsibility to provide the means and technical assistance whereby the staff of each school can acquire, interpret, and use the information necessary for carrying out the two foregoing functions. Gronland continues. In summary, process accountability emphasizes that teachers should be held responsible for knowing their subject matter, knowing their students, knowing the factors that influence learning, and using professionally sound instructional procedures. The intent is to maximize learning, but it is recognized that learning is influenced by such a conglomerate of in-school and out-of-school factors that a teacher cannot be held individually accountable for the amount of learning that occurs with a particular student or with a given group of students. Conclusion. As has already been mentioned, accountability in education is a means by which valid and appropriate goals and objectives are determined. The progress made towards their achievement is measured. Factors and conditions facilitating or regarding outcome are assessed, and improvement of the program is planned. The main focus of accountability is on the improvement of the teaching and learning situation for the beneficial gain of the students. The following are important considerations as criterias in accountability. 1. The focus of accountability is on the process of instruction. 2. Process of accountability is a shared effort which includes the teachers and other school personnel. 3. Product of the demonstrated student performance forms the basis of accountability. 4. Accountability takes into consideration the various influence and constraints that the teachers have to work under. 5. Accountability differentiates accountability lines ascertaining who should be responsible for various different areas of the instructional program to reach a goal. 6. Improvement of the instruction as its major function. Accountability provides for analysis, interpretation, and reporting of results, and encourages institution of experimentation with new ideas, methods, techniques, and materials. 7. Accountability requires a cooperative joint effort of teachers, school administration, including ministry official S, regional education officers, and school-level administrators, parents, and students to identify, define goals, and establish priorities. 8. Accountability further requires supervisors jointly with the teachers to break down the general goals into instructional objectives operationally stated for each and every course of instruction to be taught. 9. Accountability insists on operationally defined goals in order to assess and measure the final outcome of the school. Students' demonstrable behavioral change against them. 10. Accountability should take into account regarding operational objectives stated by subjects, facility, or constraint of resource, their appropriateness to the students intended to benefit, their clarity to be measurable. 11. Accountability should as much as possible cover the evaluation of all important samples of the product, with the intention of establishing validity and reliability. 12. Accountability makes available the results of the evaluation for information, decision-making, and improvement of the teaching-learning situation. Finally, our discussion this morning is very much limited and does not cover complete theories and practice of accountability. It is not my intention to present fully the available knowledge on accountability in education, as much as to make the participants aware of this new dimension of instructional evaluation and improvement. A great number of writing on accountability are available, and selected chapters, research financings, and reports have been made available for your information and in-depth study. It is my sincere wish, therefore, that you make good use of the knowledge you have received here to make the education of this great nation effective, efficient, and productive. Godspeed. References. 1. Alkin MC Accountability Defined. UCLA Evaluation Comment. Center for the Study of Evaluation. UCLA Volume 303. 2. Bloom B.S. Hastings J. T. and Madus G.F. Handbook on Formative and Simulative Evaluation of Student Learning, 1971, McGraw-Hill Book Company, New York. 3. Combs A. Educational. Accountability from a Humanistic Perspective. Educational Researcher. University of Florida, September 1973. 4. Gromland N.E. Determining Accountability for Classroom Instruction, 1974. Macmillan Publishing Company, Inc., 866 3rd Avenue, New York, New York, 10022. 5. Johns, R.L., and Morfitt E.L., Financing the Public Schools, 4th Printing, June 1985, Prentice, Hall Inc., Englewood Cliffs, and J6. Klaus Mayer, H.J. and Godwin W., Learning and Human Abilities. 2nd edition, 1966, Happer and Rowe, Publishers, New York. 7. Lucio, W.H. and McNeil, J.D., Supervision. A Synthesis of Thought and Action, 2nd edition, 1969, McGraw-Hill Book Company, New York. 8. Marks, Sir J.R. Stoops, E. King, Stoops, J. Handbook of Educational Supervision. A Guide for the Practitioner, 2nd edition, 1978, Allen and Bacon Incorporated, Boston. 9. McDonald, F.J. The Criteria for Accountability, Pupil or Professional Performance. The Journal of Educational Evaluation, Evaluation Comment, Center for the Study of Evaluations, UCLA. 10. Morfitt, E.L., Johns, R.L., and Reller, T.L., Educational Organization and Administration. Concepts, Practices, and Issues. 3rd edition, 1974. Prentice Hall Incorporated, Englewood Cliffs, New Jersey 11. Sergiovanni, T. J. and Starrett, R. J. Supervision. Human Perspective, 2nd edition, 1979. McGraw-Hill Book Company, New York. 12. Stake, R.E., School Accountability Laws. The Journal of Education Evaluation Comment, Center for the Study of Evaluation, UCLA. 13. Tanguian, S. Education and the Problem of its Democratization Evaluation Comment, Center for the Study of Evaluation, UCLA, Volume 4, Number 1, February 1973. 14. Terrace, M. Education for Value Judgment in a Developing African Bureau of Educational Sciences. Mimeograph. 15. Wickline, L. E. Educational Accountability Through Evaluation, Educational Technology Publication, Englewood Cliffs, NJ 07632. 16. Wiles, K. and Lovell, J. T. Supervision for Better Schools, 4th edition, 175, Prentice, Hall Inc., Englewood Cliffs, New Jersey. 17. Wrightstone, J.W., Hogan, T.P., and Abbott, Accountability in Education and Associated Measurement Problems. Test Service Notebook 33, Test Department, Harcourt Brace, Tavanovich Incorporated. New York, 10017, New York.